Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Whitwam Organics Weekly Garden Report. My name is David Whitwam, and I am your host. Thank you so much for joining me. Gosh, we have a lot to talk about. We finally got the weather change that we were looking for, this big cool down that I've been predicting, but like next week, it's gonna warm up. Um, this is kind of what we go through over basically all winter. We're gonna have some really cold snaps. We're gonna have some really hot days. For the most part, the weather's pretty temperate, and most of your vegetables will be pretty happy. But it's with these kind of weather shifts that I usually see pest problems show up. So anything that we had in that enjoys the more warm weather, when it finally cools off, that's the stuff I usually see pest problems on. Uh, just in the same way where our cool weather crops that we've had in with the warmer weather that we've been having, that's what we usually see the pest problems on. For example, now that we just got, when we were having that warmer weather, the kales, broccolis, and cabbage that we had put in a little bit earlier, that's really the stuff that we saw the aphids on. Um, really, the thing I think I do the most for pest control is I mean, when I walk up to a garden, I always have my scissors in my pocket. I'm constantly removing parts and pieces of plants. If it's edible, I'm harvesting. If it's a tomato plant, I'm cutting leaves off the plant that don't look so hot. If it's a squash plant, I'm cutting off the leaves that are showing signs of diseases. I've just really found that the more I kind of am tinkering with the plants, not just kind of letting them sit there and grow, um, the better they do. The other thing is if I do have to use a pest control product, I have to use less of it because I'm not just sitting there spraying leaves that are covered in aphids or a ton of leaves that are covered in powdery mildew. So I do a lot of manual removal first. And then I'll also follow up maybe with a feeding of micronutrients. Then if the problem persists, I might have to get out a pest control product. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I am starting to see a slight resurgence right now of whitefly on some of our peppers. I don't know if maybe this is just I've got my fingers crossed. I've got my fingers crossed that it is a little bit isolated and isn't gonna, keep going. Um, because whiteflies are tough. There's been a lot of them on peppers, and I'm not just talking about here in our nursery. I'm talking about speaking with other gardeners. And I'm talking about seeing a resurgence of whiteflies in some of the gardens that I visit and tend to. So it just kind of stinks because these plants, I already picked them bald from the last whitefly infestation, and they were just now starting to flush out. So probably going to go out there and pick a lot of the flowers off, the smaller fruit, pick all the leaves off that have the juvenile whitefly larva underneath the leaves. And I really hope that this is not going to just keep going. I'm also going to feed the plants a little bit of our extra compost plus fertilizer. If I strip it of its leaves, a little bit of light extra, organic liquid soluble nitrogen fertilizer like a fish emulsion or hydrolyzed fish is not such a bad idea. Excuse me, because that plant's going to need a little bit of extra food and energy to push out new leaves and to stay healthy. And eggplants, I had some Japanese eggplants in one of my gardens that were showing some stress, and I do fear it's nematodes, but it's not root knot nematodes. I am going to do something pretty stupid. I'm probably just going to replace them. I'm going to replace the plants and see If the new fresh plants just tank right away, I'll know it was something in the soil, short of sending the soil in for a soil test or getting out my microscope. It's really hard to tell if it's not a root knot nematode. That doesn't rule out nematodes. There's many types of nematodes in our Florida soil. So I'm actually putting them in there just to see if they do tank. Then I will remove all of the eggplants out of those beds because it's just a few in select spots. And I will replace them with something in a completely different family, like mustard greens or any brassicas, but mustard greens especially have been shown in some studies to decrease the frequency of nematodes. Many reasons why it could be happening. The most benign is just they don't feed on the plant, and so they starve. The most extreme theories are it actually pushes something out into the soil. Some people will even till them under, a lot like people would do with marigolds. So we're going to try mustard greens out. I've found that marigolds don't taste very good. And I like mustard greens. So that's what I'm going to be using as a mid crop on a bed that I think has nematodes. So I'm going to get to the questions here in just a minute, Tammy. And then, yeah, these are great questions. Okay. So in our nursery, we are going full tilt boogie with our winter stuff now. Is it too warm for it? Maybe. But just in the same way where I started my warm season stuff back when it was still super hot, because I knew that the more mild weather was around the corner. Does this bite me in the butt every once in a while? Absolutely. For the most part, I'm right, or at least sort of right, and I'm way ahead of the curve on getting my vegetables up and going. I always use zucchini as an example. Let's say your zucchinis take 60 days to start producing. I usually try and have them producing by the end of September, beginning of October. And if you kind of do the math, that tells you that you should be planting your zucchini by seed in your garden in beginning of August. It was still really hot. Again, did we have some problems? Yeah. Did we lose some plants? Absolutely. But the 80% of the plants that were left behind are producing like mad. What would have happened if I would have waited 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks to plant? Well, I'm sure, as you can tell, it's not just the time change, but the days are getting shorter. It's not, I get it. It's now dark an hour earlier, but it was still getting dark earlier at a considerably faster speed every single day. That's because winter is coming and our days are getting shorter and the sun is getting lower in the sky. What that means is that even if you have your plants in a spot that gets full sun, the sun's rays are still going through more atmosphere till they get to your garden. And they're just not getting enough light. And especially like squashes and cucumbers can show a lot of stress and a lot of signs of problems and issues like powdery mildews, other mildew, some bacterial wilts. That just reminds me of another point I'm going to bring up. But anyway, basically, as the days are getting shorter, it can cause problems. Whereas with other crops, it actually helps them out because the sun's not as intense anymore. So even in the squash that we planted later, if you've been watching my videos, you hear me say I like to plant in another round in succession. Those are just now starting to produce, but they are already having some of these lower light issues that plants can have, we're still going to get 2, 3, 4 weeks of production out of them before they completely go bye-bye. So days are getting shorter. What does that mean for you? Keep an eye on your watering if you have automatic irrigation or if you're hand watering. Well, if you're hand watering by sight and by touch, you're not going to have a problem. If you're on some sort of an automatic irrigation system or you're just getting out there and watering based on the calendar, then and you haven't made any adjustments at this point, you're probably overwatering. Right now, the only things that need water pretty often are transplants. You really, this time of year, as soon as you can, you want to back your water off as much as you can. The frequency. So usually what I do is, let's just say that I'm watering X amount of space for 10 minutes a day. And that's what was happening, July, August, minus rainy days, consecutive rainy days. 10 minutes every day. Or even right now, I'm watering stuff 10 minutes every day for new transplants. Well, when I back it down to only 3 days a week, I might increase it to 20 minutes each time and maybe get it all the way up to eventually I'm only watering once a week for really mature vegetables or twice a week for maybe 30 minutes. And just, really giving a good soak. What that does is it helps your plants get deeper roots. You want to really make them work for their water. I like to make my plants work for their water and not really work for their food. So I kind of baby them as far as, these are my annual vegetables now, heavy feeders. I kind of baby them on making sure that they have enough food, but I make them work for their water. I don't mind going out to my garden and seeing the plants under a little bit of water stress before I actually water. In fact, on some gardens, I've actually gone as far to see at what point do I kill the plants by not giving them enough water. And I'm not talking about I do this as a regular, I'm talking about back when I was learning. And then go up a little bit from there. Overwatering your garden can be just as detrimental to not watering it enough. And especially during the colder winter months. And again, there's 2 main reasons why that happens, why that's important. Number one is the sun is not as intense, so your plants are not pulling as much water. They're not losing as much water to, I'm going to say evaporation. I don't think that's the right word. I think it's called trans something. I don't know. But it's basically the water leaves the plant's leaves, and because the capillary action pulls the water up through the roots. And you'll just have actual evaporation from the soil because it's so damn hot. But the other thing, if you're watering too much, is with the cooler weather, you have less bioactivity in your soil, and that is what is making food available for your plants. And a synonym for available is soluble. So anything that your plant doesn't take up, that the biology has sort of prepared for your plants, if you're overwatering, you could be washing that food out of the zone of your plants to eat. And a lot of our annual vegetables they have really shallow roots, and a lot of our annual vegetables, we're trying to get them to do something very quickly, and they all have relatively short seasons. So even just screwing up on feeding them for a few days here and there, it to me, percentage-wise, if you're talking about getting 8 weeks, 10 weeks of production out of a plant, even though you might have it in for 2 to 4 months, but you're only getting good production out of it for a limited period of time, if you miss a week, that's a lot. If it's 10 weeks of production, that's 10%. So it doesn't sound like that's a lot when you're like, well, I'm going to plant these plants here and I'm going to grow them all the way until here. Wow, that's a lot of time. But really, it's just that little bit of time at the end that you're actually getting production out of that plant. And so make sure if you're thinking about like, oh, if I mess this up or if I'm a week late on this or uh, mess up on splitting up plants and set one back a little bit, meaning like, oh, I'll get into that later, but thinning your plants by actually digging them up and trying to separate them can damage the roots of both plants and set them back some as far as their production. Like, when will they be producing? Unless you're very, very careful and know what you're doing. So any of those reasons, if you're losing a week or two of harvest off a plant, that's a huge percent of the actual harvest that you would have gotten off that plant, right? Anyway, that's kind of how I think about that. So if you live in Florida and you have a St. Augustine lawn, I think Zoysia might do this as well. But like during the summer when we get a lot of rain, it's like monsoon season, the rain, if you notice yellowing in your grass, that's kind of what's going on, especially if you're using a lawn company that's using like soluble chemical fertilizers. That's just so much rain. It's just pushing the fertilizer out of the root zone before the plants can uptake it. So you get deeper roots by backing off on your water. You're not going to end up with like fungus gnats, or you might, but not as bad. You're not going to encourage as many fungus problems, nasty, stinky soil because it went anaerobic. You're not, and your plants are going to be able to actually have time to consume what the soil has converted into available food for the plants. So a lot of benefits to not overwatering. And this time of year, when our days are getting considerably shorter faster and we haven't hit and it's starting to cool off, I see a lot of people right now overwatering. And it's a big mistake. I make the mistake still to this day. I'll forget to let a customer know to change their water timer. And then kind of the next time I go, I'm like, oh, this stuff looks too wet. So just something to keep an eye on. Really, the rule of thumb is the rule of finger is if you can stick your finger in the soil down to your first knuckle and somewhere in between there you hit more moist soil, you probably don't need to water. In other words, I think it's okay to let the entire quarter-inch to half-inch of soil dry out completely, as long as everything under that is damp or wet and has water in it. This is for established plants. This is not for brand new transplants. You need to baby them in the beginning and wean them off the water as quickly as possible. So that's the main thing I got going on in the gardens right now. Like I said, in the nursery, we are going nutso, planting all of our winter greens and vegetables. Starting to plant spinach, all of our lettuces, all of our flowering brassicas, all of our other brassicas, all of our cabbages. As far as like what we have available and what you should be planting in your garden, don't forget about root crops. This is the perfect time of year for all the root crops, turnips, radishes, rutabagas. Don't forget about rutabagas, y'all. Poor rutabagas. That used to be one of the biggest crops for starch. It contains a lot, if not all, like vitamins or something. It's been a while since I read about it. But if you haven't tried growing rutabagas and if you grow them, if your experience with rutabagas is that old nasty, like waxed old thing that's sold in the grocery store that's kind of pungent, I really encourage you to try growing rutabagas. They really are delicious. They still do have a little bit of that rooty, pungent flavor to them, but nothing near what the ones you buy at the grocery store. If you have any experience growing your own food, you know, for a lot of stuff, the difference in taste of what you grow at home compared to what you get at the grocery store, it's night and day. Rutabagas are no different. Turnips, beets, carrots, all that fun stuff. So get that stuff going. If you're limited on space, and you're new to this, just remember that your carrots, beets, all your root crops aren't really like cut and come again. So when you plant the seed, one seed equals one plant equals one carrot, one beet. Well, not to be sidetracked, but beets can have 3 or 4 plants in each one. But aside from that, when you pull it out, it's gone. It's done. So if you're limited on space, don't go filling that whole space up with all of your carrots, because they'll kind of all come in and be ready about the same time. I mean, you can start harvesting some of the smaller ones earlier and have a harvest for a couple weeks, but when they're gone, they're gone. And then you'd have to plant more seeds, and then it's going to be another 60, 70 days before you get more carrots. So that's what I mean when I say plant in succession. So, if you got this much space for carrots in your bed, start out by planting a quarter of it with your carrot seeds, wait about 2 weeks, then plant another quarter of it, and then wait 2 weeks, so on and so forth. So you kind of take your whole row and break it up into 4 sections and plant each section 2 weeks apart. That will give you a longer successive carrot harvest. Then when you harvest your first section of carrots, you can add some new soil, fertilizer, and put some more seeds in there. And then you get more of a consistent harvest throughout all of carrot season. Just a little tip. So the topic of today is, it's not a really hardcore topic, but with 2020 coming to a close, and with the week I know we've all had, and the past months, I'm not going to get political, but I just know we're all a little stressed out, to say the least. And I don't care who you are. And, I don't want y'all to forget about your garden and gardening, because I really do truly believe that it provides you more than just the food that you're getting out of it. I can go way down this rabbit hole of kind of how I feel about gardening and connecting to the earth and learning how things work when we're not involved, and then also figuring out how they can work and how we can manipulate and work with nature to produce food. And there's something deeply therapeutic about all of that. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in the garden. To give you guys some examples, when I meet somebody who says that they have a brown thumb, and I begin talking with them, or I'm working with them side by side trying to teach them gardening, 9 out of 10 times they are either, it's like, it's not that they're not good at gardening, it's that they have characteristics that are pretty dominating, in that they're either, by nature, in other things, not just gardening, they're either over nurturing or they're under nurturing. And a lot of people I talk to, when they kind of get into gardening, if they stick with it, I've actually seen people overcome that and have it transcend into other parts of their life. So, being over nurturing, it doesn't just give you a brown thumb in the garden. That's just one of the, I think, the things that feels it, that you kind of see it, that this is affecting that. Other things that I've seen, and this one is for me personally, with the gardening, it's not all about kind of keeping everything. I mean, I said this in the beginning. it's not about keeping everything, and it's not about just kind of setting the whole thing up and just letting it go. There's a lot of removal. There's a lot of killing things. There's a lot of accepting of killing things. There's a lot of um, pulling out crops before maybe they're really done because the next season is coming. Um, what am I trying to say? So with gardening, one of the things that I think is really cool is it lets you kind of practice, kind of work out a muscle that maybe I think we all can use, and that's decluttering, uh, letting go of past things and preparing for new things. Especially annual gardens. It's really, to be successful at that. That is another thing that I see people have brown thumbs. They're very hesitant to thin their plants or trim their crops, or they end up with disease problems because they just hang on to those old plants for way too long instead of throwing them in the compost pile and planting the new stuff. And I think that's kind of how life works. So it's not just therapeutic. I think when I tell people that gardening is very therapeutic, a lot of their first reactions is more like they're talking about kind of like while you're gardening, your blood pressure goes down. It's very calm. It's very relaxing. But I say it goes way deeper than that, and that the garden and gardening has a lot of lessons to teach us if we let it. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. So, Vaughn, you're absolutely right. Practices nurturing and patience. I'll tell you what, don't ever ask the universe to teach you patience. I'd rather get it from my garden because, a lot of things that we want, they take practice. And if you ask for patience, then the universe will give you plenty of things to practice being more patient with. So I'm gonna go ahead and run to some of these questions, and then I'm gonna hop off. It's getting late. What time is it? 5:58. Oh, well, I've been going for 30 minutes. Wow. Okay. All right. Let's see. Tammy, is it too late to plant winter vegetables? No way. No way. In fact, you're a little on the early side for your winter stuff. Our winter growing season really goes from fall through winter and well into spring. Some stuff will continue into like really early summer. So I would say you're somewhere in between like really early and on some other stuff right on time. The only things I would say you're late for is anything that I would consider like a summer crop or a late summer crop. And maybe on starting some of your fall vegetables by seed. You could try it. Really, just it depends on how much sun your garden gets. If the spot you want to put your garden gets plenty of sunlight, and it depends on when your first frost is and how much effort you want to put into covering the stuff up. If you have an area or a year where we don't get a frost, and you have an area in your yard that gets full sun, and we have a mild winter, or you want to go out there and cover up your stuff and put Christmas lights under them and keep them warm, you can grow your spring and your fall vegetables as long as we don't get a hard freeze and as long as we don't get back-to-back cold fronts where it's cloudy all the time. We can grow our spring and our fall stuff literally like all winter and into spring. So you're definitely not too late. Let's see what's next. Is it insect infestation evidence that this? All right, Penelope. Hi, Penelope. Thanks for watching. Okay. Isn't insect infestation evidence that this is probably not the right time to plant this vegetable variety? Vegetables send out a distress signal, and the pests show up. I seldom have pests, never aphids. Years past, I did, but now I plant later, not earlier. I love your info. Well, I mean, you are more than welcome to wait. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. That's exactly what I was saying. That the pest problems are just simply a sign of the plant being stressed out. Um, and I don't, because I know there's cooler weather right around the corner. So I don't worry about the pests. They're just aphids. And I'd rather get kale early. When I was saying I go out there and I keep the plant, I pick all the leaves off, I'm not just picking off the leaves with the aphids on them and throwing them away. We're washing them off and eating them, and they taste fine. So, you know, I have a feeling that the aphids are probably edible. Probably taste pretty good too. The ants sure seem to love them. But um, good evening, Richard. Thank you for joining me. Yvonne, you are so right. Yeah. So Yvonne said that the garden teaches mindfulness, um, nurturing, patience, and Yvonne, did you catch what I was saying earlier about I think our garden teaches us as some people how to not be so nurturing. I think there's a lot of people with personalities where they're over nurturing, and maybe they need to learn. Maybe the muscle that they need to work out, maybe what they need to practice at, is actually stepping back and some removal. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that. The cool thing is you can have one garden and a bunch of people going in there and doing the same stuff, and like everybody walking away with something different. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys with that. And thank you so much for joining me. If you cannot join me live and you have a topic that you would like to discuss or a gardening question, you can send them to info at whitwamorganics.com. I do this, it's live on Facebook, but if you are either joining me from YouTube, you already know this, but if you stumbled on this on Facebook and you're not big on Facebook, I'm also simulcasting to YouTube. My YouTube channel is super easy to find. It's just Whitwam Organics. If you're watching this on YouTube, I also have a Facebook channel that I'm simulcasting to, and I also post other stuff on Facebook. We also have a e-commerce nursery where all of the great products, seeds, and seedlings that I talk about are available. And that's, of course, at whitwamorganics.com. So thanks, everybody, for joining me. And y'all have a good night. And everybody, just relax. Get out there.